Now, during an interview over the weekend, the Prime Minister seemed, I mean, I've heard the audio for this, and I'm not sure, I wonder whether people are reading too much into it, but appeared to be accepting a £1,000 bet towards refugee charities that planes will take off for Rwanda before the general election takes place. Tim Loughton, if this is genuine, I mean, what a crass thing to do.
I completely missed this. I didn't hear that interview, and I've just heard about it now. It sounds a completely throwaway comment. I don't think it was a serious bet intended. We used to be a phrase when I used to work, I bet you a pound to a jam tart that something will happen. So I don't think he ever intended this to be a serious bet. Whether it was £1, £1,000, a jam tart or whatever is... I really think we're overthinking this. I mean, everything the Prime Minister or ministers or others say these days are just so over-analysed. So he was perhaps overemphasising for effect his confidence in the government's Rwanda policy. Let's leave it at that.
Steve, have you heard this clip?
Yeah, I watched the interview, and the Rwanda policy is a disastrous mess. I think Rishi Sunak knows that himself. He tried to express that view when he was Chancellor and Johnson was trying to do it. However, I've watched this thing, and it is naivety, not anything sinister. If he was 20 points ahead in the polls, no one would be making anything of it. It's when you are behind, this is what happens. Things get over into... I can see exactly what he was thinking in his mind. It was a kind of trick question. If he refused to do the bet, people would say Sunak's got no confidence in his policy. So he does shake hands with Morgan as if they were doing a bet. It lasts about a second. He looks awkward because he hasn't quite thought through what he should be doing. So he's naive, and the Tories should be worried about that with an election coming up. But it wasn't a kind of reckless act of malevolence where two very rich people were having a laugh. The policy is wrong. The policy probably will not be implemented with any effectiveness ever. But on this, I feel a bit sorry for him. It's because he's behind in the polls that people see the worst in him and everything he does.
Layla.
Well, I agree that the plan's not going to work. That's why I voted against it at every possible opportunity. We do want to find a way to stop the people smugglers. We do want to find a way to get through the backlog so that those criminals are deported as quickly as possible. And I hate how it's sort of spun that somehow we're on different sides on those issues, because we're not. Anyone would be on the side of the rule of law. We don't want people who shouldn't be here to be here. But at the same time, I am looking at a policy like this and the impact it's going to have on my constituents, because it will, because there is a detention centre called Campsfield House that is going to be reopened, having been closed, by the way, in 2018, reopened to the tune of something like £400 million to house 200 people who may or may not be going on these flights that may or may not ever take off. And I think to myself, forget the grand. What could £400 million do better?
OK, but that wasn't quite the question. The question was about how it looks for the Prime Minister to engage in a £1,000 bet.
No one has a grand. I don't. Cost of living just sat there to make a bet. I've got a grand that I'm saving to put towards things that really
that
matter.
Jacket must have cost at least £1,000.
Oh, thanks, darling. No, it was second hand, actually. Anyway, look, I think it is a bit crass, yeah. But, I mean, the betting on... It's just... I didn't see the clip. I heard about it. I'm not a betting person, so I don't do that sort of thing. But if I do bet, it's like a fiver. To bet £1,000 on something, £1,000's a lot of money. Even to people who earn a fair amount, like us, 80-something grand a year, £1,000's a lot, let alone for an ordinary person.
No.
So I agree with Steve. I don't think there was any sort of malicious intent behind it. I don't think Rishi Sunak meant to sort of downplay the impact that the cost of living crisis is having on so many people. But the Prime Minister does have an issue with optics. This isn't the first time that he's been in an interview where he's had a slip up. And I think as we get closer and closer to a general election, these are all just very easy gaffes that Labour can use, and that if you just look on the face of it, if you don't watch the full clip, it doesn't look good. And so I think he just generally needs to be more careful and sort of, all these slip-ups, and I really don't think that, again, he meant to sort of play around with money and compare it in that way. This is all ammunition that Labour understandably are going to use, and he needs to be more careful. And this all just adds into this image that so many people have in their minds that he's just so out of touch.
I think the most interesting thing is that most other prime ministers, you think, well, how would they have handled it? How would Margaret Thatcher have handled being asked that question? How would Tony Blair have reacted? And it wouldn't have been in the way that Rishi Sunak did. I mean, does this sort of, Tim Loughton, does this make you a little bit anxious about the election campaign? Because, I mean, in an election campaign, you're under so much more pressure and scrutiny than you are any other time.
I think Rishi is a pretty safe pair of hands and usually puts in pretty assured performances and certainly has facts and everything at his fingertips. When he gives interviews, when he performs at PMQs, it's quite difficult to get one over on him. I'm sure former prime ministers would handle it differently. I mean, Margaret Thatcher, from a good Methodist background and the evils of gambling, she would have given the interviewer a good lecture about the evils of gambling and drink and everything else to go with it, probably. So I'm sure, on reflection, he was caught out by Piers and wouldn't by choice have wanted to use that.
What is bizarre is that he goes on a programme that has about 20,000 viewers with an interviewer that is renowned for this kind of questioning. I don't know what they were thinking of putting him on it, but anyway.
And we're giving it more publicity by talking about it rather than the people who actually saw it live.
His YouTube channel is very successful, to be fair.
The whole interview lasted an hour. He gave an hour to Piers Morgan. This was at the very end. On the whole, it was quite a soft interview, but this was a trick question. But you're absolutely right. Prime ministers with more experience, and he rose to the top too quickly, without learning these arts, would have run a mile from being filmed shaking hands on a bed, especially for £1,000. But that's what he did. But as I say, I think it was kind of naivety, and I could see him trying to think, how do I handle this? And he missed out.
Are you confident?
He can't win.
No,
He's going to be doing
true.
GB News and taking all comers from callers. So if he doesn't do it, say you're frit and you're hiding from the public and you're out of touch. He does do it, and is going to be doing it with Joe Public calling in. I
remember when he was Chancellor, he did an hour-long phone-in on Budget Day, which a Chancellor had never done with me. And a Chancellor had never done that before. And you think, well, that's quite a brave thing to do. I don't think I asked him a trick question. I think I gave him a hoodie at the end of it, Capital Radio hoodie.
I'm sure he wears it all the time.
Well, I have seen him in it.
That cost £1,000 as well.
It certainly did not. It cost me a penny. Are you confident the planes will be leaving before the election for Rwanda?
I think that the chances are they will.